Well, what happened was now I was friends with Nigel, and he was playing in the Junior World Championship in Dortmund. So I went to visit him, and by the way, I met one of my best friends in chess ever. This was John Nunn. He was Nigel's second. And so he became also a friend. He also came to visit very often. And I was walking on the street, or I was hanging out on the street outside the tournament hall when I was approached by a young man who came to me and said the famous words, 5-3, draw you win, $5 a game. And
now,
what he meant,
for the uninitiated, that means 5 minutes to 3 minutes.
Yeah, what he was saying is, you get 5 minutes, I get 3 minutes. If the game is a draw, it means you win, and it's $5 a game. He had cleared everyone else out. So I said to him, no, I know who you are. Don't, because he assumed I was talking to Nigel and to John, and he had no idea who I was. So he thought maybe I'm a Grandmaster second or something, or helping these two, and decided, since he had cleaned out everyone else, nobody was playing against him at these conditions, he tried to get me. Later at the dinner, closing dinner, I sat down next to him and I chatted with him. And he claims he remembers that. I don't think so, but because for 5 years we didn't have any more contact. And this was Gary in 1980.
Now, at that point, he actually was winning the World Junior Championship
easily
in that time, and was already obviously on the radar of everybody in the chess world. But did you have a sense of that you were talking to somebody who was going to go on to do great things?
Of course. Everyone knew that. And for this reason, what happened was I read in a newspaper article that he had given a simul in London, and they had given him a computer, which was the famous BBC Acorn computer. And I had the same computer at home. So what I did was I made a floppy disk. Many of our readers will not know what that is. It's a floppy disk which had data on it.
I copied some floppy.
Yeah, it was floppy. You know what it is.
Well, then there were floppy disks, quote unquote, that were actually quite hard and not flexible.
No, this was the real floppy.
Yeah, I'm just old enough to have had some experience with the original floppy version.
Okay, and I copied some games onto it and I put it into an envelope, and wrote on the envelope, Gary Kasparov, Baku, USSR. That's all. I didn't have his address or anything. And I posted it, and nothing happened. And a few months later, he came to Hamburg to play against Robert Hübner, a practice match. He had just had his long match against Karpov, which had been interrupted. And the next match was planned for the end of the year. So he came for a practice match against Robert Hübner in Hamburg. And when they asked him, what do you want to do on Sunday? It's a free day. He said, I want to visit a friend in Hollenstedt, which is a town outside of Hamburg. And they said, how could you know Hollenstedt? And who is this friend? So he said, I have a friend there. And so he came, rang my bell, came in and said, hi, I'm Gary. You're Frederic? Okay. This is your wife? And these are your 2 kids? Very nice and beautiful house. That's a nice garden. Okay. Now we're friends. Can we talk about computers? He came to find out what are computers and what can computers do for chess. And this story has been told a number of times in his first autobiography, which is called Child of Change. He spoke about that, he wrote about that, and now more extensively in his latest book, which is a very nice book, very interesting book. It's called Deep Thinking. And he describes how he came there and he played the game and he got crushed by my 3-year-old son in this computer game, and how that changed his attitude towards young people and computers. It's very interesting. But what he did was he sat down together with me every evening during the match, and we discussed computers. I told him what computers can do, and he told me what computers should do for the chess world, which is amazing because he had access to more information than anyone else in the world except maybe for Karpov. He was very privileged in this, but he was looking for making this information available to everyone. And Gary and I, we drew up a plan to make something which he said to me, what do you call it? A database. Yes, we must make a database. So we drew up a plan and described it, and the Spiegel, which was a big news magazine here, and was the host of the match against Hübner, they published this. Friedel and Kasparov are planning to make a chess database. So every crackpot in Germany called and said, we have one, or we can do one. And I actually traveled to a few, but they just wanted access to Kasparov. So I didn't know what to do. I'm not a programmer. And then one day, a young man approached me and said, "Yeah, Mr. Friedel, you want to create a database? Here's a disk." This was a small floppy disk, but one of the hard kind. And he handed it over to me and turned around and walked away. And it had his address. I took it home, stuck it into my Atari, and it was a rudimentary chess database, which means you had lots of games, and you could load them, and you could replay them, and play through the moves backwards, and so on. And this was Matthias Willenweber, a physics student. And then at some stage I said to Matthias, I called him and I said, "This is very, very interesting. Would you be able to come to Zurich to show it to someone?" And he said, "Yes, I could." "And to whom?" And I said, "Well, Gary Kasparov." And I heard a thud, Matthias fainting. No, actually he didn't. But he was really... He confessed to me later that at that time he had once seen and been in the same room with an international master and was so proud of that. So he hitchhiked actually to Zurich, and he came there and we set up an Atari and he loaded the program, and Gary was playing against Tony Miles. And after the game I said to Gary, "Come, I want to show you something." He said, "Fred, I'm tired." I said, "No, just come." So he came in, he saw Matthias sitting there, he wanted to leave. He doesn't want to meet new people when he's tired. So I said, "No, come, sit down." So he sat on my bed, and Matthias showed him the database. And Gary didn't say a word, he just watched it. And then suddenly he threw himself back on the bed and lay there with closed eyes. And Matthias looked at me and, we're boring him. Yeah? He thinks this is just too stupid or what. And then a minute later, Gary jumped up and said, "This is the most important development in chess study since the invention of printing." This was like Armstrong landing on the moon. He had to find the right words. So he was thinking about them. And then Gary, he just encouraged us. He said, "You have to do this, Fred, Matthias. You have to." So we founded ChessBase. And he kept encouraging us and always asking us, "Can you, how far have you got? Can it do this? It must do that," and so on. And advising us and so on. And then there was a very important phase. I think it was 1996 or 97 January, when we had the program ready, ChessBase 1.0, and was just ready. And Gary came to Hamburg to play against the German team, the Hamburg team, Bundesliga team, which contained a number of grandmasters. It was 8 players, and he had played against them a year before, and he had lost 3.5 to 4.5 because they were hideously strong. Murray Chandler on board 1, And so he said, "I'll get revenge," and he came back. This time, I gave him a disc which said ChessBase 1.0, serial number 00001, and said I had a computer there in his room in the Atlantic Hotel, And I said, okay, let's prepare. And he said, so I called the team and asked who's playing and which color. And they told me, dictated. And I said, okay, now we have to prepare against these players. And he said, okay, I'll go down and have a coffee or something. And when you're ready, I said, I am ready. And he said, how can that be? So I said, okay, let's try. We type in the first name, Matthias Wals. And bang, we get 30, 40 games. And now you can play through them. And he said, you know, Fred, this is a new era. Because in the past, if something like this happened, my seconds would say, okay, we'll come back in a week. And they'd come back with piles of books with little notes in them and slips of paper in them. And you require 10 seconds? So he started studying them, and he studied all the players. And then I saw something which I think nobody has ever seen before or since. I would go onto the stage and find out which is which player, and then he would be introduced, and he would come on the stage, and I'd introduce him to the chess players, his opponents. And one of them was called Sönke Maus. And I said, Gary, this is Sönke Maus, and his playing strength is 25, 30 or whatever. And Gary said, Sönke, hi, and gave him his hand like this. And then went on to the next, and Sönke was saying, that looked like he recognized me, but he's never met me and he's never heard of me or anything. Why did he behave like that? Because he did know him. He knew everything about Sönke. He knew that he plays the, I don't know what, poisoned pawn. He gets nervous if his king is under attack. He suffered a dreadful loss in some line. He knew everything about Sönke. And, he won it 7-1. He just wiped them off the board. And then we traveled to many, many places. We played against the French team twice, against the Swiss national team, against the German junior team, against the U.S. junior team, then against the full German Olympiad team with 4 strongest grandmasters, which he also won.
These are all in simultaneous.
Yeah, clock symbols, where he's playing with the same time as they have. And this one was with Vlastimil Hort, who was a World Championship challenger, Matthias Wals, and 2 other players. And he won that tournament, that clock symbol. So we did a lot of this together, and it was fun, always with preparation using ChessBase. And what Gary did for us was he did all of these, and he would do press conferences before these symbols and show people, this is how I prepare, this is ChessBase, and with ChessBase I can do this. Without it, it would be impossible. And this is the program, and Frederic has this company, and they're selling the program. So he did promotion and endorsement and so on for 10 years for us. Of course, we had to pay for it. We paid exactly what? 0.00 German marks. Because, I was sort of part of his family now. And you don't charge a cousin or an uncle for this kind of thing. So, Fred, come on. No need. So, I owe a lot to Gary. And the company, ChessBase, just sort of grew and grew and grew. Today, as you know, we have about 30 people working here. And we have a huge operation in chess. And everyone who plays chess is using it, just like Gary did in the first days of ChessBase, is using it to prepare for informal games, club games, tournaments, world championships. And so I owe a lot to Gary.